020 722 42000.
Text 81333. Start your message with the word London.
BBC London 94.9.
Simon Lederman Show, BBC London 94.9. On the text, this says, just caught the end of your guest singer. Beautiful voice and try to get the name, but couldn't. So I'm going to tell you who it was because you've asked about it. It's if you look up Richard Poyner and the Dukes of Mayfair. Richard Poyner, Poyner, and the Dukes of Mayfair. And I think he said it's the dukesofmayfair.com or dukesofmayfair.com. But if you don't have any luck with that, just give us a call and we'll try and find out for you again. Right, taking your calls, 0207 224 2000. Very soon, in a few moments, we're going to meet our two guests to review the day, Jonathan Davis and Tess Reid. Tess is an expert on saving money and Jonathan is an economist, and we'll find out their views of the day's news very soon. But a few things we're talking about tonight. Tesco's saying that it's our fault we're wasting food. They're saying this at a House of Lords inquiry. We're getting a reaction on that. We're talking about Uruguay, who are saying that they're going to legalise the production and sale of cannabis, and they'd like the world's help with this experience and experiment. We're talking about Pope Francis, who's been named Time Magazine's Person of the Year, and we'll remind you of some of the other finalists for that honour, if indeed it is an honour, and also taking some of your memories of the Clapham Rail disaster 25 years ago this week. Indeed, tomorrow on the anniversary, December the 12th at 8:13, there'll be a 2-minute silence at the site, and we're getting some of your memories of that tonight. Sarah's in Bromley. Evening to you, Sarah.
Evening, Simon.
Welcome to the show. How wonderful to speak to you.
Yes, it's not often I call in on the late night show.
It's an honour. It's usually emails only.
Yes, or calls on a Saturday morning.
When we're in slightly more crazy a mood.
Yes.
And it's not my fault. You know whose fault that is.
Well, we won't blame anybody in particular, Joe.
No, Joe, no. Right, Sarah, so I remember Clapham very well, and I remember just the incredible moving pictures on the front page of just mangled wreckage the following day. What do you remember? I think you were not that far away.
Yeah, I used to live on Queenstown Road, which has the lines running through to Clapham Junction just behind, and my bedroom looked over that. And I just remember waking up and just knowing that something was wrong, and I couldn't work out what it was. Opened my curtains, still couldn't work out what it was. And then, was listening to the radio and heard the news, and I realised that what was wrong was I was totally used to the sound of the trains moving, and there was just this eerie silence because nothing was going through. And nothing started up again for a few days, if I remember rightly, and it was just this eerie silence when you're used to the sound of the trains, and you don't realise how much you meditate on that. And sort of the next thing I sort of do remember from it, of course, it was the days before mobile phones and everything.
Yes, yeah, very slow news process getting people to know.
And suddenly news was breaking, and of course people then begin to realise that you live in the area and that you often get the trains through that. So then people are trying to get hold of you and are worrying. And I don't think I even had an answer machine at that point.
Were you aware then of how serious the crash was? Because even now it's the most serious mainline train crash in terms of the numbers of people who've died since the crash in Lewisham in 1957. So even then it was an absolutely huge event.
I mean, what I do remember is people talking about it at work. Because I think during that time there were a number of train crashes and various things, and because there was some bombs. There was a crash at Victoria that happened, and what I do remember was that people began to be very aware of which carriage you should maybe not travel in, and whether you were better off at, in the middle, the centre, the end. And I don't think any particular area was safe. It was just people were basing on what was happening at the latest crash. But I think in terms of the enormity, I actually feel more. Remember more. The enormity was actually more around King's Cross.
Yes, the tube disaster.
That one really impacted on me because
in '87, I think.
Because a friend of mine, she would have been going home from work at that point and was on that line, and she didn't have a phone at home, couldn't get hold of her, and the following day she was not at work, and it was 48 hours before any could get in touch with her. and she was going through as people were getting on Singe. So, all of those things, when they are big things in London, I just think most people there is something that affects them. And with Clapham Junction, because there were a number of things that happened there, and for me it was actually always the silence.
The silence, and you weren't quite sure what it was until you heard the news. Sarah, thank you so much for that. And Sarah, Robin says, on behalf of all the old lags that are online who are fans of this show and the show that Joe does and the one we do together, wants to say to you a big shout out from all of them. So
lovely, and I'm seeing him tomorrow evening.
Gosh, well, don't tell everybody; they'll all want to be there. Thank you, Sarah. Thanks very much indeed. 0207 224 2000 is our number for more on that and more on all the other subjects we're talking about on the programme tonight. In the company for the next hour of Tess Reed, who's a money-saving expert, and Jonathan Davis, who's an economist. Welcome to the programme, both of you. It's very good to see you.
Lovely to be here.
I think it's the first time we've had two people with an expert in finances and the economy in the studio at once. We could solve all kinds of problems tonight if we play our cards right. Do you think or not? Do you think that is possible?
Very exciting, definitely. Yeah. I'm on tenterhooks.
Yeah,
we could perhaps state what the problems are. That'd be half the battle, perhaps.
There's one big problem, isn't there? I don't think there's just one huge, humongous problem. That's it.
What's the one big problem? Tell me.
Everything.
Everything.
The economy of the world.
That's okay then.
Yeah.
We've narrowed it down.
We're
halfway there.
We just need a solution.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sure we will progress through this. But before we start, though, I do want to just get your immediate reaction to this Time magazine Person of the Year. This is the news that although Miley Cyrus nearly did it, she was indeed in the top 10. It was Pope Francis who was named Time magazine Person of the Year. What do you make of that?
Well, it's got to be somebody. It seems a better choice than many of the top 10, which apparently include the president of Syria.
Indeed, it does. Yeah,
I genuinely can't understand. So yeah, it's a very important event, having the first pope from Latin America. That's a very important thing. So I can get that, and he certainly seems a very humble person, which in this week of reflecting upon Nelson Mandela's life is something that I think appeals to a lot of people and makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. So, yeah, gets my vote every time over President of Syria and Miley Cyrus. So I'm not to argue with it. I don't know
probably the first
Jonathan.
time any list in the entire world would have included Miley Cyrus and the President of Syria. What about you, Jonathan? What do you make of this list?
The list is pretty ridiculous as far as I can see, apart from Edward Snowden, who
got to number 2, I think.
Well, he should have got to number 1. He has done America and the world an incredible service. He is a true patriot, as indeed is Ted Cruz, the senator in that list. So from that point of view, I give it my vote. I understand, I think, why the Pope has been awarded it, because he has said some pretty revolutionary things in this first year of his papacy. I was really into him in the early days when I heard that he'd eschewed the 10-bedroom palace, but in fact he had a couple of rooms and one servant or something like that, and he was really living a really basic lifestyle, and he was showing that the papacy doesn't have to be all about Louis XIV palaces and all this kind of rubbish. However, in the last month or two, he has shown his true colours, which is that he's a socialist, he's a Marxist. And he wants basically everything nationalised. Well, they've tried it in country after country. It doesn't work.
No, you could argue they've tried capitalism in country after country. That maybe doesn't work.
Well, you tell me where there's capitalism, because I don't know. Singapore, but there's nowhere else there's capitalism.
We've got mixed capitalism, haven't we?
Well, it's not capitalism that I understand.
No. Okay, well, we may get into that at some point, but I have a feeling I'll be beaten hands down by any debate regarding capitalism with either of my guests tonight, who are, as I say, Jonathan Davis and Tess Reed. Let's start with some of your stories. Tess, can we start with you? And one of these things, which I remember certainly my school used to not fear, was quite proud of, because they did quite well when it wasn't Ofsted in those days, when the inspectors visited. But this is Ofsted and behaviour in school.
Yes.
Tell us the story.
Yes. So the Ofsted's released its annual report, Sir Michael Wilshaw is the Chief Inspector of Ofsted, and he has reported that there are a number of good news stories this year for Ofsted, which is that the highest percentage ever so far of schools are rated as good or outstanding, which is excellent. And there's been a great number of improvements, which is also excellent. But he has found that there is a great differential in schools in different regions, which can't just be explained by indices of poverty or etc. And he has pointed a finger in several areas. He said we need to bring back outside testing at a whole range of ages. He has certainly implied that there's a problem with the teaching unions pushing through change. And he has pointed a big finger at a problem of behaviour in classrooms, which renders it difficult for pupils to learn. And he's talked about a poverty of expectations, which essentially means that that some schools or some teachers have low standards for what's acceptable in classes, and that's a problem. So I think people have many diverse reactions to this, and I think a lot of people would recognise that there are a lot of behaviour problems in schools, and clearly that impacts upon children's ability to learn, and that's a problem. The question is what you do about it. And he seems to be, above all, saying that what we need is more rigorous testing. But I think, actually, one of the things to emerge from this is that London has done very well in recent years and in this latest year. And a lot of other regions have done very poorly in comparison. And, for example, there's a school in Tower Hamlets which has gone in 16 months from being in special measures to being outstanding, which is absolutely fantastic. And the question is, what's happened in London? What's been different in London and in this school as an example of that? And the answer is that London has had something called the London Challenge, which has been about schools working together and pooling resources and pooling ideas of how to improve things. And indeed, in this one particular school, for example, called Manorfield in Tower Hamlets, change has happened by, yes, a new head, but then she did not rule autocratically, dictatorially, but instead worked with the whole and large set of stakeholders, from parents to all the teachers and so on and so forth, to think of a better way forward, and above all to improve the quality of teaching. It's actually, at the end of the day, good behaviour, organising good behaviour, is all about the quality of teaching.
Is it, though? Because certainly there will be people who have this black and white image of schools many years ago where there were far more pupils and students in far tougher times, where there was a great kind of behemoth of a figure in front of the class who people were blind scared of and would behave accordingly and wouldn't dare step out of line.
I hope nobody's advocating we go back to that.
Well, we have teachers
really
who
hope
can't
we don't
control classes and in some cases have no power to control, not through the fault of their own, but are not empowered to do it.
But I think what London has shown is that there is another way, which is that if you have really excellent teachers and you partner with all sorts of other institutions and organisations within the community to help parents in deprived areas, then you can really get something working there. And I think that people do have to really understand the difference between schools' responsibilities and parental responsibilities. I had a conversation yesterday in Morrison's between a fishmonger and the butcher. And the fishmonger called out to the butcher.
It sounds like a joke.
But it's actually a true fact. Called out to the butcher, broad sort of Cockney tones. Do you read to your children? And the butcher called back, yeah, of course I do, man. Yeah, every night. And I thought, yeah, that's right.
That's the secret.
That's what parents need to do. By contrast, I was at the swimming pool with my kids at the weekend, and there's sort of communal changing, and there was a dad and his kids were getting changed, right? And he was saying, come on, put your clothes on, come put your clothes on. He said, no, not that way round. Your trousers don't go on that way round.
Gosh,
they go on the other way round. And then he said, I don't know why your school's teaching you history and literacy and maths. They should be teaching you how to put your trousers on the right way round.
That may be your role, Dad.
Exactly.